Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the book Us Against You by Frederik Backman. This book is actually a sequel to a book Beartown that he wrote, which I haven't reviewed on this channel, but I did read, and it is a really good book. But as usual, I will start with a summary and then I will get into a review and my thoughts on the entire book. I will leave timestamps below so that if you want to just skip ahead to the review, you can do that. Because it's a sequel to Beartown, if you have not read Beartown, this book, it could make sense to you, but I really don't think it would be very good unless you had read Beartown first. So I would definitely recommend reading Beartown first and then reading this book. Anyway, let's start with a summary. This book again follows Peter, the general manager of Beartown Hockey, and his family. Following the events of the last book, his daughter Maya is recovering from her assault, and his son Leo is kind of struggling with these feelings of intense anger regarding Maya's assault. It also is really focusing on this new coach who comes to Beartown. And first off, she's a female hockey coach, and she's trying to build this new A-team sort of using the talents that they have. So Amat gets bumped up to the A-team from last book, and Benji is made captain of the A-team, which is a little bit controversial because he's obviously younger than quite a few of the other A-team players. Bobo is also put on the A-team, and there's kind of a newer player that I don't think we saw last book, Vidar. He just got out of basically like a juvenile, I think it's like a juvenile detention center sort of thing. I'm not exactly sure, but it's something meant for kind of rehabilitating troubled youth. And so he gets out of that and he is going to be the goalie. And he's really probably the person that she's building the team around the most because he has this crazy good record, not with the law, with hockey. So basically, we've got this new coach, she's building this new team, and the first sort of half of the book probably is the obstacles to making sure that the Beartown Hockey Club stays alive since Kevin left and since Kevin caused some huge basically PR problems for the hockey club, which was already struggling. Peter is really having to go out of his way to save it, and this new coach is trying to do her best to prove herself and put together this team. So the first half of the book, I would say, is just those problems being worked out. And then the second half of the book really deals with escalating tensions between the neighboring rival town Head and Beartown, especially among the pack. They're an unofficial group of kind of Beartown super fans, I guess, is how I would describe it. It's hard to explain, but they will go the distance even when it's too far in order to make sure that Beartown hockey is protected and Beartown people are protected. And so there's definitely like this huge escalating tension between the pack and Peter as well, because part of the agreement for keeping the club is to take away their area where they like to stand. Since the first half is so focused on getting these things done, it's very politically driven. I mean, it always is, I guess, but it's a really interesting look at kind of bureaucracy and how things can get done. And then, yeah, the second half is just escalating tensions, old rivalries coming to a head, new friendships and relationships being formed. And really probably one of the most escalating things that happens is that Benji, who we as the reader have known is gay, he is outed against his will by Maya's best friend when she is just in anger. She posts the pictures online and that becomes a huge problem. So anyway, in the end, all these tensions have bubbled to the surface. The Head team coming to burn down the Bearskin pub, and then the pack tries to stop it and tries to go after them, and Vidar, whose older brother is part of the pack, is involved in this whole thing. And basically in the end there's like a big car accident and Vidar dies, and it's really sad, but it's also a really good moment. I think a learning moment for his brother, maybe, that just there's been too much violence, and violence only breeds more violence. And I think that that's actually kind of a big theme in this book. And aside from that, I would say it's generally got a happy ending. Characters end up mostly where you want them to. The one character that's a little bit more of a mystery, we don't know where he ends up, is Benji. So if there ever was a follow-up book on Benji, he was probably my favorite character to read about, so I would be really interested in that. Enough with the summary, I'm gonna move right into the review. So there's something that I really liked about this book that also seemed to be something he used in the book Beartown, which is the use of repetition of certain phrases within the book. So the phrase will appear in regard to one character's thoughts or circumstances, and then again for another character not that long after, creating a cohesive narrative, but then also linking the idea that even though these characters seem to be going through different things, it's not really that different. And I think one of my favorites from this book specifically is the phrase, "Masculinity is difficult at any age." And it's said, I know, in reference to Leo as well as his dad Peter, and I really liked that, the way that that echoed back to say, like, yeah, it's really hard to be a 12-year-old boy. And they're like, yeah, you know, it's really just hard sometimes to deal with masculinity in general. And that's definitely a huge theme in this book in general, is I think masculinity and how we view those ideals and how that plays into our treatment of others. That definitely seems to be a thread running through this, which makes total sense. Honestly, when I picked this up, I was initially skeptical about a sequel to Beartown, but he absolutely manages to recapture what Beartown brought for the reader and to the reader. This is probably a little bit less suspenseful, which I kind of appreciated, and a little bit more focused on interpersonal relationships. I think it provides a little bit more of a resolution to the story involving Beartown. You get to see these people be as okay as they will be, and I really appreciate that. It's funny because I just didn't think it needed a sequel, but now that I've read the sequel, it needed a sequel. It absolutely needed this to wrap things up. I think this book doesn't just address masculinity, I also think it is addressing gender roles and expectations in general in a lot of different ways. With everything from assaults, like dealing with Maya, to what it's like to be a working mom, dealing with Maya's mom, Kira. That theme really culminates with people finding out that Benji is gay, because a lot of men and women in that town viewed Benji as the ideal of masculinity. He was a wild card, he fought a lot, he drank, he smoked, he played hockey, he was super tough. I think it's really interesting to have that be the way that this town has to confront their ideas of gender norms and sexuality, and I really was on edge reading it, but I enjoyed it. In these books, he really has a lot of foreshadowing that he uses with the characters, and I generally like it. I actually have a complaint that he may use it a little bit too much. So he'll often have a phrase like,
"In 10 years, Amat will be playing for the NHL, and when interviewed, he will thank his Beartown coach."
Okay, it's fine to have those peppered in. It's really reassuring to the reader in a story so volatile and so emotional. But on the other hand, I think that he is a little bit too generous with sprinkling them in. And to me, it can often read as just like too much of that. And that's okay, but that's just a personal preference where I enjoy a little bit of that foreshadowing language, but I also think that there's too much of it in these books, if I'm being completely honest. I think one of the things that made the interpersonal relationship exploration so well done in this book is that some of the people who we felt were really vilified in the last book, like William Litt, who went to beat up a Mott, we get to see another side to him, and it just really is such a good reminder that there aren't generally people that are all bad and all good. That's not really a thing, and it's always more complicated than that. I liked exploring some of the characters that we might not necessarily even want to explore because we think of them as like bad guys or something, or we don't like them. And I liked having that little window into William Litt and how he's always felt pushed aside by Benji, and I thought that that was a really interesting character to get to explore a little bit more, especially after he switches to the head hockey team. I appreciated that. It shows you a more well-rounded picture of everybody, not just the characters you're already kind of supposed to like. I don't have a lot of complaints about the writing, but as I said, I think that he's a little bit too heavy-handed with that foreshadowing language. That would probably be my primary complaint, but still it's not a big one. I think that this is generally a really good book and definitely a good sequel, and I would recommend it if you've read Beartown. I think he writes some really great stories that are centered around people. They're very much centered around people and people who feel real, and I enjoy that. So I would definitely recommend this if you like stories like that. If you don't, then you might not like it, but that's okay. Anyway, that is it for this video. If you've read this book, please let me know if you enjoyed it in the comments below. If you didn't enjoy it, also please let me know. So I will see you later.